Hello, everybody out there, and welcome to another community webinar from the Bodhana Group. So welcome to our community webinar series. This is one of our Heroes of Gaming series, and today we're going to be introducing you to another one of the very, very special Heroes of Gaming, Heroes of the Realm as we talk about them, Mr. Meeple. So we're going to talk all about social skills. So we'll do more full greetings and stuff, but as usual, I'm Jack from Bodhana. How you doing out there, everybody?
I would like to welcome you to another episode of Therapy's Theater.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, so as you can tell, these are our kind of who are you, though? You didn't introduce who you are.
You're right, even though the screen says it. Hi, I'm James.
Oh, that won't come up in the recording, though.
It's true. James Kirk, one of the other usual facilitators here for the Bodhana trainings. Today, we are going to introduce you not just to a hero of gaming, but among the heroes, the superhero. Not like the best, but like like has powers. Hero of gaming. We are going to talk about Mr. Meeple.
Yes.
And the social skills.
Yes. So without further ado, as we normally do, let us go ahead and share our presentation, and we will talk all about Heroes of Gaming series. This is a series where what we do is we break down different beneficial aspects of specifically the board gaming hobby, and this is part of our free community content that we offer on our website, and we're also going to be uploading all of this to our YouTube channel, so that way you can learn all about different areas of gaming, different focal points of gaming. We even have some fun ones. I know one this month, for those of you kind of keeping your scorecard, March Nuttiness, talking all about sports games. So yeah, let's go ahead and forge forward then. So as said, I'm Jack Birkenstock Jr., the Executive Director, one of the co-founders of the Bodhana Group. Been a therapeutic game master for over 5 years, gamer since 12. Variety of systems and games that I am knowledgeable in, tabletop, board, as well as RPG. And I have my master's in human services degree from Lincoln University in 2008. And sir.
Yeah, James Kirk, therapeutic game master with Bodhana for over 3 years now. Gaming for almost my natural life. Also super knowledgeable about a variety of different games. I got my degree in Awesome at UU.
I thought you were going to say you graduated from Gloomhaven University.
Well, no, Gloomhaven is life, so I would have graduated.
Oh, that is true. I minored in Craghart.
There you go.
All right. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, first, we're going to mention some of the other services that Bodhana offers. So first off, we have board game programs, such like pre-COVID, our monthly board game meetups that we would offer here at 6 Feet Under Games, one of our local game stores, which was designed to help folks from the Tommy Foundation, folks who experience autism, interface through gaming with folks in the general community. We offer a wide array of programs. We can set them up for your organization. We offer therapeutic role-playing game groups, either for private pay or for companies. We offer consultation and training. These are professional series trainings designed for therapists, educators, practitioners who want to use gaming in their practice. We develop resources, including our upcoming role-playing game system, Branch Riders. We develop webinars, much like what it is that you're watching here, so you can add more tools to your toolkit. We do annually run the Save Against Fear convention. It's our flagship fundraiser in October every year. And we have a published volume called Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness about therapeutic role-playing, with a follow-up volume to come very shortly about therapeutic board games, which again is what this community content is going to focus on. So, James, you want to tell us about the Heroes of Gaming for those
might be asking what Heroes of Gaming are, right?
Yeah, it's right there in the question.
If you look over to the right, At the photo, you're going to see all of the heroes of gaming featured there around Save Against Fear. So the characters were created by the Bodhana group to embody core disciplines that we build through gameplay, the main areas that we focus on during our work. So today, we are focusing specifically off of that list on social skills. Duh. Yeah, I get it. Games, people talk. Yeah, we're around a table. We have done the Sprechen, and now it's time to spiel. I took 3 years of German. I'm allowed to use some words. So while inherently, like, nearly all games have some sort of social skill development, we want to talk today about ways to be able to identify the level of social skill development in a game. Basically, what makes a game a social skills game versus a game that people can talk while they're playing, right? We're going to give some strategies for implementing games in social engagement, making decisions on the types of games that you can include, because Jack and I are going to go through and give you some games that we wanted to highlight that are much more focused on developing and using social skills in games.
Yeah, I mean, the general idea when we talk, because again, the whole focus of the community webinar series is about letting folks know that there are ways that you can work on skill building in the home, everyday practice. And one of the things about the word Bodhana, which means leading to an awakening or an understanding, is that by playing games that have a lot of these core disciplines just built into the fabric of the game itself, you know, just by playing a game, you're developing certain skills or practicing certain skills. We want to give you these options to add to your family game night, to add to your regular repertoire of play. So you know that you're not only having a fun activity to engage in together, but you also have something with a little bit more impact and intention behind it. So we always, during these community sessions, want to leave you with a series of game recommendations that you can go to your local FLGS to pick up. And today, that focus is going to be specifically on social skills and games that break these areas down. So to kind of start us off, when we talk about social skills, this is a very, very wide umbrella with a lot of stuff falling underneath it. So we're talking about games that enhance communication, which is a very core aspect to social skills. You know, social, communication. Again, we're not just talking about talking or speaking. Communication is everything that we do. There's verbal communication, there's nonverbal communication. Behavior is communication. When we engage in a certain behavior, we make a certain choice. We may not always understand it, but that behavior is communicating something, typically an unmet want or need. So we're talking about communication, the way that we engage and talk with each other. We're talking about listening, picking up on the words people are saying, the context of the words people are using. We're talking about being able to listen to behavior as well. Different modes of expression, how we make end friendships, because being able to kind of determine for yourself whether or not a friendship or a relationship is healthy and how to break that if it's unhealthy. That's
depending
Yeah.
on the game, just maybe you're not going to have friends anymore after that game is over.
Yeah, especially if it's Munchkin.
Yeah.
So again, as we talk about this, we again, this is not a training in social skills. There are core social skills, and these things are different benefits that we can find. We're just going to talk about games and types of games that break this down, because you can find a lot of these other elements in any game. We talked about deck builders already in this series. We're going to be talking in the future about a game mechanic called Take That, which is, like screw your neighbor, quote unquote, or games where you have to like go against other players. We've talking about cooperative games at some point. Yeah, they all have vestiges of this, right? You communicate when you're just playing a game, so naturally it develops that skill. But we're highlighting games that do this particularly well, or do this in a way that is a little bit longer lasting or a little bit more integral to the process of the game. So we thought, let's tell you about 3 different ways that we can break this down, right, James?
Right. So social gaming, we've kind of broken down into 3 main areas of interpretive games, which this includes games that are based around like deductive skills, your ability to take in information, and through that act of listening and sort of paying attention to context clues and things of that nature, decide what somebody or something is trying to communicate to you, thereby interpreting the communication that you're being given. Social component games, these are games where the actual game mechanics themselves absolutely thrive centrally around mechanics that are based on social interaction or developing specific social skills. And then performative games. These are games where players are either acting or singing or using different modes of expression to enact the play of the game itself. And I mean, yes, charades is actually a form of communication, as far as as far as that goes. So that would be considered a performative type of game. And all 3 of these main areas will have social skill components, but they will very likely, off of that core list you just saw, these games are going to work on more than one at a time. Really, like no game is just like, I want something good for expression and nothing else. Might I suggest poetry?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Games are by their nature going to work on probably at least 2 to 3 skills at a time, sometimes more. But it's just what your brain can take in. We can only handle so much information barraging us at a time. So these are the 3 areas that we're going to break social games down into. And take us to the next slide, Jack.
Okay, so we're going to start with, of course, interpretive games. So one of the interesting things about social conversation and communication is most people consider communication to be a fairly back and forth activity where I say a thing, you hear a thing, say a thing back to me. Well, actually, what kind of goes on in social communication is I will conceive of an idea, then I will think, well, wait, I'm saying this to James. So knowing what I know about James, what words are going to best express this idea out of what I have available, what I know James is going to gel best with, and then how do I say those with, I'm Ron Burgundy, where we talk about like our emphasis or the way that we pronounce these terms. Then we deliver that message. A message is sent, the person receives it. They then have to unpack and go, well, Jack is telling me this, so the way Jack's saying this might be different from how another person would interpret or say these things to me. So communication is this constant back and forth act of processing, receiving, sending information. So when we talk about interpretive games, we are interpreting social cues to see what's being communicated. James mentioned charades, which does have aspects of this as well. You're doing a hand motion that conforms to a certain word or a certain concept. There are other board games that do this, which are a little more deductive as well as interpretive. Things like Concept, Taboo is a very famous game where, you have to reference certain clues. Monikers is another great game like this, where
even Scattergories. Limiting you by letter to the words that you can come up with.
So the whole idea is the words that we use, the expressions that we choose, even something like code names, which is another great example of this, where you use certain language to prevent or cause double meaning. So I may use a term that unintentionally misdirects. Or if you're playing a game where you're trying to not get guessed by the other team, you want to use a word that is a little bit more confusing to kind of throw the other players off. There's a lot of ebb and flow in this because let's examine this for a sec. If we are talking about interpretation, one of the most fun ways, because again, James, I know that you've played code names.
Yeah.
I've always found that one of the most fascinating aspects of playing code names is that the more players you get on your side, the harder the game becomes. Because the whole idea is that there are a series of basically one-word phrases out on the board, and they're all little cards. You have to fill out kind of like a grid that you have. It's a little map. You know that certain colors are your players, certain colors are the other team, and you have to get your team to guess the code names of all of the spies, which are the little squares on your map. So your agents are kind of found. Well, sometimes words, you might say bark. Well, bark could be dog, bark could be tree because of the bark of the tree. So, we kind of take this whole thing of synonyms and homonyms, all these word language things. My frame of reference might be different from another player's. So the more people you get around the table, people are going on these wild, well, they could mean this because of that. Or, we're going to talk about Mysterium as a good example of these type of games as well, that this engages social conversation because the more we know about a person, the better we're able to predict with some relevance how these clues are given. Like, never play a game of Taboo against a couple who has been together for more than 20 years because they have their own language that they're going to go, like, the clue is like mop, and they're going to go, Niagara Falls. And you're like, what was that all about? And then they'll go, oh, well, when we were at Niagara Falls for our 10th honeymoon, when we went there, there was this big mess in the kitchen. We had to call room service to get a mop. And I'm just like, okay, I've lost already. This is done. But it proves the fact that by engaging with people, we are learning about other people through that engagement, and that gives us things to talk about. So these interpretation games are as much about reading the audience, about knowing who is around the table, and using that information conversationally for a desired purpose. So we're testing and practicing skills like choice of language, intonation of language, the way that we describe things, the way that we are setting a picture up for other people around the table, which is very, very fine-tuned skills for social engagement. We talk about what we call reciprocation in communication, where there are reciprocal volleys. We're talking back and forth, and it's like a verbal volleyball match. I hit it over to you, you hit it back over to me. This is how conversation works and how we engage and develop relationships with people. Interpretive games are just one way that we can build that simply through play.
And further building those skills, because this is a game, because we're talking about games provide levels of challenge or ways to be able to challenge that development where we might normally not have those tools available. It is not a game that I would say is a social skills game, but it will make my point very effectively. Poetry for Cavemen is a party game where you are given stanzas, you're given verse, and you have to recite them only using monosyllabic words, like a caveman would. Right? It's a very cute, very entertaining game. Not necessarily like a social skills game, it's more vocab development. However, take that principle, a lot of these interpretive games, as a core mechanic, somehow limit the type of communication you can use. Code names, if you're giving a clue to that team, remember Jack was saying, the more people that are on your team, the harder it is because everybody's got a different idea of what you mean. When you give a clue to a team, you can only use one word. That word cannot be any of the words on the table.
Yeah.
And you are trying to give a clue to your friends to get them to guess as many of your tiles as you can and not select any of your opponent's tiles in the process.
Tough balance.
So now let's take those communication skills and really stretch them out to think about, actively thinking about, and draw a parallel here. You have to say something very difficult to a friend, right? And you kind of agonize over just the right words to be able to be able to say, right, in that situation. Different stress between having to deal with a friend in a difficult situation and having a party game on a Friday night, like where you guys are having fun. But that same skill and those same muscles are being used for two completely different exercises that can now be joined together because you're doing the same thing. You are applying critical analysis and critical thinking skills. Because then remember our earlier discussion about critical thinking. One of the things about critical thinking is overcoming our own bias. We have ways that we want to express things to people, but it may not necessarily be the way that they will all understand. I happen to talk in a lot of movie quotes. I have to stop myself because in a room full of people that are not regularly around me, I get when I do it.
Head, right?
Right. So practicing these skills in this game allows you to practice the idea that you have to consider or choose your word carefully.
Yes. All right. So going to slide to our next little area here, which is social component games.
So social interactions among the players is kind of the main mechanic of social component games. The quality or the type of the interaction drives the game forward. You're using a lot of basic social skill components: active listening, paraphrasing, debating, or persuading people of a particular thing. We had done a series on
social
deduction games, right? Identity-based games. These are social component games. If you hearken back to when we gave you an example about Ultimate Werewolf, right? So sitting around playing that game, we're not talking about whether or not players are being invested. Remember that stuff that we said we weren't going to talk about during that time because later we were going to talk about it?
Oh, it was a foreshadow. Yeah, all right.
So players have to use basic social components of active listening and debating or persuading. If you're one of the werewolves, then you better figure out a good way to be able to convince the other people at the table that you're not. Right? So practicing skills of being able to not only persuade, but to debate without yelling. Right? Like we've discussed, like debating is different than arguing. Debating is just simply presenting an opposing side to things with facts, either real ones or yours, and then saying like, nope, this is the way that something is.
Yeah. Well, and even further, James, we can talk about other games along this vein where, we're talking about games not necessarily with like a hidden agenda or like, because that was one of the markers of social deduction games. But there are a lot of bluff games, Sheriff of Nottingham, Banquet, like, there's a whole bunch of different games that use this idea of bluffing where kind of everybody is kind of against each other, but the interaction and again, the words that you're using, it's less based on the information, and it's in this case more based on the player and how the player is portraying. A lot of things, if you've ever been to like a host your own murder party. I don't know if those are still a thing in this day and age, but they were fiercely popular in the 90s, where that was a big aspect. People are playing a role, they're delivering information. It's almost like a play that it's going on. Now, that borders then to kind of one of our next areas, which is performative games. So, performative
Acting.
games, brilliant, thank you. See, right there is an example of communication that James and I could share because of our knowledge of SNL and John Lovitz and John Lithgow.
Yeah.
But performative games are based on things such as acting, singing, physical performance, expression. This is charades. This is miming. This is, all kinds of, games that use these different areas. These games,
board game wise, one that I can think of like immediately that I know Jack is going to cringe when I say this is Encore.
Yes,
which is
yes.
it's a board game where players are tasked with coming up with song lyrics on the spot that use particular words or have like particular subject material in the lyrics.
Yep.
And the game obviously highly encourages you to sing those things. But a lot of these games also have, if you see on the bottom of this, the final bullet point, they have built-in things for like, I'm not good at singing, so I don't really want to play that game. Just speak the lyrics. It's fine. You're not disqualified if you can't, sing the words.
Yeah.
So everybody still gets to play. But one of the things that I like for social development is that these performative games also sort of force even the wallflowers to have their spotlight minute, where they have to be the focal point of attention and working those expressive muscles in what is hopefully an environment where they are more comfortable to do so, allows them to be able to kind of get used to expressing themselves or expressing ideas, and not constantly being able to lean on that crutch of, well, Jerry's the mouthpiece. I don't speak. He does the talking for me. I'm the valet.
Yeah, and going even further, James, one of the reasons that performative games are so important to social skills development is when we talk about, social engagement with others, when we talk about anything from looking at, how we engage with other people. One of the biggest things that we as humans, I mean, just again, to talk about why this area is so important, is that we as humans, and we talked about this, I think, briefly in our social deduction webinar, we are social creatures. We are social animals. Nothing has taught us more about this fact than the impact of quarantine and the pandemic. Timestamps the webinar. That, we have human interaction, and even though the visual is nice, there's still something about this component of interaction. And part of this is, as we develop relationships with other people, we create memories. And these memories are very much driven on moments that we've shared. There are moments in my life that, through either the loss of a friend or the passage of time or what have you, there are moments in my life that I can't share with many other people. It might have been one of those private moments that you had with a friend years and years ago, and that's a memory that's locked into your mind. Performative games create memorable moments that are bonds to friendship and social connection. Social relationships and our connection to other people is one of the most formative developmental tools that we have as people. It teaches us what's okay and what's not okay. It teaches us what people are comfortable with, and it's a lot of ways where people try to set and establish different boundaries. If we're talking about what movie to go see, you'll learn a lot about a person by what movies they choose to see in mixed company, right? With performative games, it is also the same aspect of the things that we choose, the things that we say, and the things that we engage in are yet another layer of not necessarily, just a flat, boring skill, but it's a demonstration of a very core aspect of people. And this idea of what is called mirror neurons. So mirror neurons are a part of the brain that are receptors for social information. And what we basically pick up as we're engaging with other people is, if I tell a joke, if I make a statement, I'm looking at the reactions of the other people around me. And this is a very key factor in the way that we learn how to navigate who is in our social environment. Performative games and all of these games that use social components as part of their mainstay, it's just another way that we can develop these kind of on the sly, that we're practicing these skills. Now, of course, that, because we always talk in our presentations about challenges to using these type of games, and there are a few, right, James, when we talk about social games?
Yeah, I mean,
there can be.
Sure.
It's Bill Lumberg.
Maybe you don't have the social skills. One of the issues with social skills gaming is that when you are specifically developing social skills, you are not playing a game where the parts all come in the box. You're bringing some of the game playing ability with you to the table. Naturally, there are going to be some players who have better tools than you do at that table. So some people are naturally going to have that leg up at the beginning, and that can be frustrating, that can be intimidating, that can be both of those things. Social skills challenges also feeds into trouble reading social cues. Just the idea that we had to learn online, it is easier to figure out when you are physically with people when somebody is trying to speak, or when to begin your sentence and not interrupt the next person. Online, way harder to do, because people are talking, and sometimes there are these pregnant pauses that happen, not because it's an awkward silence moment, but because people are legitimately now giving that extra beat to make sure that somebody has finished their thought before continuing with their own. And that is us developing our ability to read social cues online. We didn't have that skill in the beginning.
Yeah, well, and there are even some other challenges that, again, we learn these along the way, that, there are some folks, and again, I'm not saying that this is atypical, that this is typical of all persons, but one of the commonly recognized traits amongst persons who are on the autism spectrum or who experience autism are some difficulties reading social cues, maybe not being able to gauge inflection or tone. If you're playing a game, and again, this is more of kind of like a role-playing game, social party game, but it's called The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which is based, of course, on the very popular, movie and fiction about a baron who he told himself a tall tale in his day. So there is some form of exaggeration and creative invention within the telling of the story, and there might be some players who may not get aspects of that because there is a subtlety, there is a nuance. And I'm totally like kind of spiking the ball for you here, James, about nuance skills, because I definitely want to hear from you on this majorly, because one of the big core things in playing any of these social games with you, when it comes to pantomiming and charading and acting out things, you have an advantage over other players in a lot of aspects, do you not?
I've had some training. Yeah.
Yes, you have.
So
speak your truth, sir. Speak your truth.
Yeah. So being able to be comfortable in one's own skin, and knowing how to express outside of verbally saying something, and be able to not just pantomime something, but be able to read the people that are at the table and understand that they're not understanding what I'm saying, and be able to come up with different ways to say the same thing, right? Like all of that stuff that I can do in moments and turn on a dime. Somebody else might not be able to do that. It's not just simply pantomiming, but it's also being able to read the room. Remember, we talked about this a little earlier. Knowing your audience, knowing how to communicate with people. What happens with somebody at the table when they not only can't read social cues and understand inflection or tone when somebody is speaking to them, what happens when they're speaking or they're communicating something and they can't pick up the fact that nobody at the table understands them or what they're trying to say? And then how off-put are they when they have expressed themselves and the feedback that they get in that communication is, no, I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know, or they fail at the game because nobody understood what this person was saying. So, you know, Jack's absolutely right. It's somebody like myself who has had boatloads of you know, communication and acting training and performance training. I can take that feedback and I can figure out immediately, like, oh, okay, audience isn't buying this. I gotta change it up a little bit.
Yep.
Let me try it a different way, you know, and reapproach the same problem and then come up with the correct way to be able to communicate something. Yeah. There are people that aren't going to have not only the basic skill, but then the nuance to be able to use advanced communication skills to adapt to different social situations.
Yeah, and it can be something as simple as when, you know, if I'm sitting on camera and I'm like this, someone might look at me and go, Jack's nervous, Jack's mad, Jack's maybe Jack's chewing on a piece of sandwich on camera and he doesn't want people to know that he's eating. So he has his hands up in front of his face, right?
Could be that Jack is contemplative.
Yeah, see?
Could be that Jack is praying.
It is not only to project, but also to emote. And some of that is, you like that, huh? Some of that is deeply nuanced. So, and this sometimes can bring meta play, and we talked about this somewhat with social deduction games. You know, the curse of when you play werewolf or some of these games with the same people over and over again, you develop your own meta narrative just through natural. You play together. Bob's always the werewolf, or whatever's going on. So,
and I will say, in party games, in like large group games, our particular group of people, we have to be careful at larger gatherings, because there are certain games where, like, Jack and James and Jen can't be on the same team because the other
scary.
team gets steamrolled, right? Yeah, you know, so with the, like, and we know that not everybody is going to do that. Some people will gleefully use that meta play, you know, to maneuver themselves onto the same team just to be like, yep, trounced him again. Sure was fun, except for the other 13 people that were here trying to have a good time.
I'm sorry. There are other people playing the game here.
Right.
Yeah, so that can sometimes be a concern. But again, when you go all the way back to the first different webinar, you know, choosing the right game, it really is at the underpinning of any of this. You know, you have certain crowds that are not going to be into deep, like Twilight Imperium 4, like not the game to pull out for grandma. Unless grandma's been playing for a ton of years and she's like a master, then yeah. But that also breaks down into, like James said earlier, the light rule structure. This is something, and we're actually going to talk about this in one or two of the games as we give as examples, where the rules are kind of wibbly wobbly sometimes, because it's a lot of games within this kind of social party game style atmosphere. You're going to find games where it's like, whoever the judge is for that round, Well, then we're kind of talking with clicking. Well, Mary always picks Steve's answers because Steve's Mary's husband, or they've known each other for 20 years. So
Ironically, even
yeah.
if it's not social skills games, the rules for social skills games are all interpretive games.
Yep.
Every
Yeah.
single one, like it just becomes an interpretation game, and like, but you're still practicing powers of persuasion because you have to sit there and somehow convince the rest of the table that what you just did to take the lead in the game is totally legit.
Yeah.
Even if you BS'd your way into it.
Absolutely. And I guess last, it even with some of the light play and some of the fact that you maybe don't have to engage as strongly the wallflower quotient, there still is the challenge. And again, we talk a lot about the use of these games to develop skills. Please remember, and I know Crystal talked about this when you and she did this episode, James, but we are not forcing people to learn these skills by, no, you will try the charades until you get it right. No. That's not how this works.
Did you charade today?
Did you try to charade last week? It's this idea of some folks may be embarrassed to perform or emote or saying the right thing. There's a lot of, we talk about paralysis analysis, and a lot of times, specifically if we're talking about someone with social anxiety or generalized anxiety, there's a very large fear within people that deal with that condition of imposter syndrome or saying the wrong thing or looking stupid, or these phrases that people use. So in a game where winning the game hinges upon you making the right choice of word that will let your team guess everyone, that can create a lot of anxiety for people. So you want to be very respectful. We were playing a game one day that involved a lot of quick math. It was a party game called Pavlov's Dogs from 9th Level Games. It's a very cool game where, you're all taking on the role of dogs and you're following commands as part of like an experiment with a bunch of doctors who are, like based off of actual like psychologists and stuff. But the idea behind the game created a lot of anxiety to one of our players who, the pressure of math quick in that social situation created so much anxiety. And so
we got done with that game, and the player, Jack had said, like, hey, did you guys like it? Did you guys have fun? And one of the players that same player immediately said, guys, it was okay, totally not my speed. I'm freaked out right now.
Yeah,
I don't think I could have gone another like 5 minutes. I need to decompress for a minute. And that embarrassment cannot just come from not having a skill that the game requires, but also having the skill, starting to play the game, and realizing you are woefully outmatched in said game, where you all of a sudden realize, like, oh my God, my dad used to say that there are going to be people that are like better than you and worse than you, and to, just, I'm so humble, that kind of thing. I have found all of the better than you people, and they are all at this table.
I'm playing a math game with calculators who have eyes and mouths. This is not fun. And social games can be that way for a bunch of people. And again, when we get to our examples, because we have a lot of games examples today, don't we?
We do. We've talked a lot about the challenges. Let's give some solutions.
Yes, here we go.
I like it.
Yes, I love your selection of photos for these presentations.
So, talk before, talk during, talk after. Talk before the game so that everybody knows what is going on with the game. Talk during the game, just kind of having a check-in. Maybe like other people are taking their turn at the moment, and you just kind of, hey, you all right? Yeah, good, cool. And then talk after. What do you guys think? Everybody have fun? Is it, like, is this a thing that we can pull out on a Saturday when we're all like, what do you want to do? Or is this something that I put, I should put that on the doom shelf. Got it. Right.
On the doom shelf.
We'll play this again when you lose a dare. Okay. Got it.
Yep.
so like if you're practicing social skills, we should probably use them too, right? So get
Yeah.
feedback about what you're doing.
Consent is not just for role-playing games. Just because role-playing games typically will enter more into emotional content, things of that nature, does not mean that you should not always be conscientious of certain board games appeal to certain people. I can't count how many flame wars occur between the pure Euro people and the Ameritrash people, and never the twain shall meet. There is no version of IP Yahtzee that will appeal to both of these people. But point being, check in with your players. And it doesn't have to be, I'm looking to see if everyone is emotionally healthy during this game of charades. It's just like, man, this is a pretty fun game. And people are, it's okay. You okay? Are you all right playing this? Like, do you want to switch out? It's okay. Because remember, people are going to be nervous about going against the grain. They're going to be nervous about being the negative Nancy, the Debbie Downer at the table that is, or complainer Carl. I wanted to make sure not all the negative presences were women there. That, the folk that just isn't into it, but everybody else wanted to play. Because fighting board games, we always thought that's always a tough engagement. I have 7 people at my house. Most board games play to 4 or 6 if you're lucky. That's difficult. Social games actually fill that niche. But then you have more players, so finding a game is very paramount, which is why the next point of making the types of interactions that are used very clear. When you're explaining a social game, because of that wibbly-wobbly nature of the rules, you want to make sure that people know how this game is going to interface. There's actually a very good example of a game that we're going to talk about that uses a very specific style of engagement that makes some people uncomfortable. So you want to let folks know what the game is about, how it's played, and how the interactions are going to go, because that might speak to someone being nervous. Now, there is something to be said when you're using this for therapeutic or beneficial intent. Yeah, there are some, hey, just give it a shot. It's okay. We could talk about it after we're done. So there is a little bit of kind of oomph, that we can do, as long as you're not pushing and hurting someone by trying to propel them forward. That's a good first do no harm is what we say in quote unquote therapy school.
And this next thing is something that I like to do, but there is a basic way to do this and a nuanced way to do this.
Ooh.
Because leading by example doesn't just mean go first. Leading by example is kind of being the cheerleader for the table, as well as the person, like, if you are comfortable with this type of game, being the person that tries to make it fun for everybody else, right? There's an easy way that by saying, like, like you take your turn and you are amazing at it, and people applaud or whatever else might be the case because you're so good. Stop it. It is entirely possible that you have just caused one of the complications that we just talked about, which is embarrassment.
Yeah.
Because you might have just scared the crap out of somebody else at the table, especially if they're next.
Yeah.
Right?
Tough act to follow syndrome, right?
A nuanced skill of lead by example is to know the room, right? And kind of get that sense of the people when you're discussing the game or when you're talking about the game. Get an honest read of the people at the table. If it seems like there's some people that are kind of on the fence, or maybe they're a little uncomfortable with the gameplay, lead by example. I have in the past done this and purposely tanked, like, and just kind of made myself a goof, right? Because I just embarrassed myself. I am not embarrassed, but I have done this sort of like shticky, like kind of fun thing where I just demonstrated to the people that are afraid of doing it, look, we're just having fun.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Right.
Oh, geez.
I'm just having a good time with this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're here to relax and have fun.
Yeah,
and if they see somebody that they know has these skills, but still kind of like, when they like have to actually do it, then it will make them more comfortable and might make them more willing to give it a go. Especially if you're willing to just stand up and look like the doof for a minute.
And you can also mix in with that, and this might have been the nuanced ways that you were talking about is we always, with normal board games, and I say normal as in games that aren't social oriented, we always like, this is the pretend round. Like, this is the game that we're playing just to learn it. It's the teaching game. So we're not going to dance on each other's, respective graves because we trounced everyone points wise. And if a person makes a bad move or a bad choice, we'll go, oh, well, maybe you could have done this instead. Can I take that back? Absolutely. It's a learning game. Not a problem. Next game, you're mine. However, with these, that kind of points to the next point here of, not only can we help people, like, oh, maybe like do this as like a clue, or maybe you can use this one, as a way to clue it in. Don't always up the stakes on it, especially if folks are learning and you have anyone around the table that is nervous or that has that fear of performance, because that is a very real thing. That's actually one of the highest pieces of anxiety for people in the world, believe it or not, is speaking in front of other people. That is one of the most common fears in the world, is people being afraid of getting up in front of a crowd of people, and people like just going, what? Nah, you don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here, Jones. I think we already talked about agree on games to play. I kind of highlighted that too, and offer encouragement. Are there any other tips that you can think of, James, before we go into the litany of games to recommend?
Nope. I think we're good.
All right. Leading to the litany, I will get us started with Magic Maze. Magic Maze is an incredible game that came out in 2017 by Casper Laptz, published through Sit Down Games, where you're essentially adventurers who are breaking into a fantasy mall. You just went through an adventure, you lost all your stuff, so you got to break into the quote-unquote fantasy mall to steal your gear. So what happens in the game is every player gets a card, and that card allows you either directional movement or a special power, which could be to warp or to use the escalator. There's 3 powers in the game's 4 cardinal directions. The map is on a square grid. So you move pawns according to those directions or powers you control. Only the player with that directional or that power is able to move the pawns in that direction. So James might be able to move people, quote unquote, up. I might be able to move people down. We must move the pawns onto spaces on the board that contain the same color. So the yellow pawn goes to the yellow store, which is where they get their piece of gear. Orange goes to orange, etc., etc. Then, after you've grabbed your gear, you switch the game, and now your goal is to get everybody out of the mall. You've stolen your stuff, the alarm is set, now you got to get out. Oh, did I mention that the map randomly gets determined by a stack of tiles that get flipped as you go to check out the next area? So every game it's a new map. Yeah, there's even more surprises, because as you can see in the picture here, there's a timer, and that timer gives you 2 minutes to complete this map. Oh, the most important part, though, this game is played non-verbally. There is no talking. You can't even grunt or point while you're playing. So if there's a pawn that I notice that James could move up to get it closer to the shop and he's not doing that, I have one resource in this game, and that is literally a piece that is a big red wooden block that looks like a little bowling pin. It's called the do something pawn. And it sounds like a bunch of woodpeckers are attacking your game table.
Because if somebody isn't doing what they need to do, you pick up the do something pawn and go tap, 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 on the table right in front of where they're sitting.
It's literally the board game equivalent of speaking louder in a language that is not understood to the person you are speaking to. Could you tell me where the library is? Could you tell me where the library is? It doesn't work. But amazingly, we actually use this game in Bodhana to teach about nonverbal communication. So we play around with kind of the regular rules toggle switched off. So people then learn, oh, what are you talking? 2 minutes? That's easy. We finished this. Okay, now we're going to play the real game. So we can't what now? Yep, can't talk.
Now shut up.
We don't say that. But on the board, there are spaces that enable you to turn the timer over to reset your time. And once you use one of those spaces, it gets X'd out. So there's options because the game also has variable difficulty. There are secret passageways that you can add map tiles to. There are cameras that you have to avoid. There are expansions. It's a very, very cool game that actually works on teamwork. And through the expression of nonverbal communication, you're learning to be able to read or intuit working together as a team without directly verbally communicating. And it is astounding that after teams play a few rounds of this game, you develop a rhythm, you develop a flow, because you are now interpreting the actions and the nonverbal suggestion communication. Because eventually, since you're not pointing or grunting like, or my favorite, taking the red pawn and putting it next to where you want the person to move it. No, that's not allowed either. You simply must put the pawn in front of the player who needs to do the thing, which is so much fun to try and get a group of 9-year-olds to do. But a very fascinating example of a game that demonstrates nonverbal communication, which is also a great learning tool if someone's, working in the human services field, or if you're working with someone who is non-traditionally communicative. It's a fascinating game that plays so sleek. It's absolutely amazing. Next. Didn't know if you had anything to add on to that one.
I
there,
didn't.
James.
That was great.
All right. Hive Mind. Do you want me to take this one as well?
Yeah, go ahead, because you actually introduced me to this game in the first place. I know I mentioned it, but you showed it to me. So.
Oh yeah, so the infamous Richard Garfield, hits upon hits. He's the Elvis of board gaming, but not as problematic as Elvis. So Calliope Games in 2016 puts out this lovely little game called Hive Mind. So the whole idea is each player is given a little scratch pad and you're asked questions. So our example question from the card is, what are 3 names from Star Wars that would be good names for pets? Or what are 5 paper things? Now, here's the thing. Players answer their questions privately from everybody else. Points are given for shared answers. So the more shared answers you have, the higher your point total, which seems like, oh, I need to be in the know with everybody else. Yes, but it operates a little differently than that. The fewest points scored each round moves that player's Meeple, because it's a bee Meeple and they're adorable, moves you closer to the exit of the hive. So the goal is to not leave the hive by trying to deduce and figure what the most commonly given answers might be. So we're going to try a little experiment here, James. I'm kind of springing it on you. So we're gonna actually live. You knew I was going to do it, didn't you?
I had a feeling.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and answer question number 1. So I'm going to write down 3 answers. Okay.
This is the Star Wars one?
Yep, 3 names from Star Wars that would also be good names for pets. Folks, we did not at all rehearse this beforehand. We did not do that at all. All right, so I have my 3 answers, sir. It's kind of like a weird version of the match game, because that's your goal. Your goal is to match other players so you don't move ahead, which does teach perspective taking. You try to figure out what other people are going to guess based on commonality, which one is a social intuition. You're trying to read the room. You're trying to read the crowd. But it also develops an idea of, and I actually love that it can give kids that struggle making friends ideas of some icebreaker questions that they can share. So the game actually forms kind of, it's instead of the Here's the talk ball. We're going to throw it around the room. Tell me one TV show you love when you catch the talk ball. All those little icebreaker things that we use for corporate events. I love games like this for corporate events because, are you done with your answers, James?
Got him.
All right. I'm going to read mine in order. You just tell me whether or not you also said the name. Okay?
Okay.
Chewy.
First one on my list.
First one on my list. You're
Yep.
kidding me. Okay, what's one of yours?
Jabba.
Oh, I did not pick Jabba.
Mm.
Okay. I put R2.
That was my third one.
Are you serious?
I am very serious. I want to see if the
Wow.
I don't know if the camera can pick
just
that up.
Just so people know that you're not fibbing. Wow, no, that is very clear to pick up there. Wow. So you see, folks, with no rehearsal, James and I, now granted, James and I share a brain because we do a lot of these webinars and trainings and groups together, but imagine how much fun to have this game like as a party game for people to get to know each other because you're learning how other people think, but you're also like, well, I don't know Star Wars. Okay, important note. When we can read the second one then, which
Right.
5 paper things. It's a brilliant game from Calliope. It's a great shared experience. A lot of fun at parties. And we'll go next.
Yeah.
All you, brew.
Yeah, Hanabi. This is a personal favorite of mine. I really enjoy this game a lot. Antoine Bauza and Asmodee. So you can see in the picture, Hanabi is a game about creating sets of fireworks. So players are dealt a hand of cards depending on how many people are playing. But instead of it being a joke, where sometimes you do this when you're playing with kids and you you have your hand and all your cards are facing out and the kid's like, I can see your hand. You're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. No, this game is actually played with you looking at the back of your cards. Your teammates can very clearly see your hand of cards and you can see all of your teammates' cards. You cannot see yours. And you see up at the top of the picture, there are some tokens that have that are white with these little designs, and then there are some lightning tokens there. During the course of the game, each player takes their turn by deciding if they're going to play a card, discard a card, or give a hint to another player about their hand. Hints have to be limited to either color or a value in their hand. So I could spend one of our hint tokens, which are the white ones, and you have to flip them over to the black side. I could point, and you have to physically tell the player which cards in their hand you're referring to, because remember, they can't look at them. And I could say, okay, Jack, this first card and the third card are both blue. Now, the object of the game, as you see these cards laid out, are to be able to create ascending rows of fireworks 1 through 5. So, imagine the difficulty of being able to see the other player's hands, not being able to see your own, and having to intuit off of information that they're giving you what you can do with your hand. Right? Because there's only a limited number of cards in the deck, and the less 1 through 5s that you can create, the less points you score. If you discard a card that you desperately needed, you're not gonna finish that row. That's not gonna get done.
That's a difficult play right there.
Yeah, and then once you've angered the gods 3 times, and they create their own fireworks, which is the little lightning strikes, game's over, and then you get whatever points you've scored up to that time.
Nice.
There is a mechanic to get hints back during the game by discarding a card from your hand voluntarily. You can flip one of the tokens that are black over to the white side, allowing you to then use it as a hint again. But you are also discarding a card, and it's something that you're probably going to need. Maybe. Sometimes it's not. But super creative game. Very, very socially compelling. Really fun. Can't suggest this one enough because it's very simple. It is a deck of cards and a couple of tokens.
All right. So more and more with the awesomeness. Another one of my absolute favorites from Exploding
This is
Kittens.
actually one I haven't gotten to play yet either. So
oh no, we haven't.
Yeah.
We got it a while ago. And so it's called On a Scale of 1 to T-Rex. And James and I mentioned Charades earlier in here. It was developed in 2019 by Wolfgang Warsch. And the cool thing about this game is all players are given on the board shared behavior. So it might be, and we're going to just use the example of act like a T-Rex. So privately, players are given intensities. You must figure out whose intensity of the given behavior matches yours for points. So just imagine playing a T-Rex. What does a T-Rex look at when it's only one? Okay, I got the arms. I still kind of know it's a T-Rex. Maybe it's like, as opposed to, and they start tromping through the Chex Mix, throwing it all over the living room. I might be 10 on a T-Rex, right? Or it might be higher on the scale. So the interesting thing is that you get points by matching intensities, by judging other people around the table, how they're acting out the other behaviors. So you're really observing behavior scales, because some of these are floor is hot lava or playing an imaginary drum kit. So they're pantomimes and they're charades, but it's not about how good or bad. In some ways, be bad at the charade, overplay it, play it over dramatically. It's part of the fun of the game, because the real points are in detecting the expression of other people around the table. One of the cool benefits, I think, of this is the fact that because everybody's being kind of silly, you're kind of given permission to be just as silly, because you're only getting points in the game by being that silly. So it's a very, very, again, one of the big missions of Bodhana, one of our catchphrases that we utilize is finding the right game for the right reason. This is a game that borrows so many aspects of other traditional parlor games and party games, but it does it in such a creative mix that you have a lot of opportunity to observe and pick up on intensity behavior, which is something they talk a lot about in emotional management and recognition, being able to tell the difference between upset and highly steamed. That's degree of emotion. So that's another one of mine there. Again, easy to find out there, an incredible game.
Yeah, you guys like Clue?
Yes, I do.
Cool. This isn't that, but take some of the basic ideas. So Mysterium, Libertad is the the company. So players are solving a murder. Suspect, location, weapon. Yeah, sounds a lot like Clue, right? Again, okay. There is a game runner. There is a proctor, if you will, that is the victim of said murder. Is a ghost. The players are mediums, or ghost whisperers.
I was just going to say, can I be a large? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. That have come to this mansion to try and figure out how said ghost got murdered. Right? So the player that is the ghost has that giant screen in front of them, and they have clues that they have to deliver to the players. And this is a tiered thing. Each player has to successfully figure out the suspect first. Once they do that, depending on how quickly they can do it, they move to the second tier and get more points for it. Then at the second tier, they have to figure out the location in the mansion. Where did this take place? right? And then once they figure out where it took place, then they move to the third tier. They figure out what the weapon was that was used. And then once you get through all of them, you are done. You are successful. You have figured out your suspect location weapon. This happens because the ghost has a deck of cards that they draw cards off of. And then with a hand of cards, limited options. They then have to look at them, know the clues that they need each player to get their own suspect location weapon, and give them a picture, an art, some type of painting or thing that are on each of these cards, and give one to each of the players. And the players have to then take this card and be like, it's a fountain. It's like a frog in it on a heart-shaped lily pad in the dark.
Frogs are green. Maybe it's the green thing.
With a gate. And then you look at all the suspects and you're like, what is this ghost trying to abstractly tell me about my person? Oh, I see one of these is a swimmer. Oh, but this other one has coins on it, and you throw coins into fountains. Maybe it's a wishing well. Maybe that's what they're trying to tell. Like, right? So
I was thinking sunken treasure, you know?
And then it becomes more challenging because as the ghost is giving clues, the ghost doesn't want to mix their clues by giving them something that the player can't build on if they didn't get the first clue. You are constantly trying to build on and solidify what you tried to infer previously. So now the ghost has to remember all the things that they were trying to say if the player doesn't get it in the first couple of actions. Players are working together because collectively at the end of the game, you also want to be able to figure out if there's 4 players, each of them has their own suspect location weapon. At the end of the game, you then have to figure out the final answer, which is what of these 4 combinations is actually the combination that killed the person that's talking to us.
Yeah.
Oi!
Which psychic is actually the best realist psychic?
The most psychic.
The most psychic.
Yeah.
Did I just say sidekick?
Super cool game.
Yeah.
It even has interactive stuff along the way where players can basically like bet on whether or not they think somebody is right or not, and be able to score extra points by using their little betting tokens to score extra points by like, I know that Fred is wrong. 100% Fred is not right about this. You know what? I'm betting on not Fred.
Yep.
You know, so it's a very cool game and uses a lot of different techniques for interpretive and inference style communication. It's pretty great.
It's absolutely an incredible game, and we're not done yet. We got a lot of suggestions for y'all today. So we need to talk. No, the game is we need to talk. So we need to talk about we need to talk. Wow, very meta inception. So published by Smirk and Dagger Games, one of my absolute favorite game companies. Actually, in the month of May, we're going to be doing an interview with Kirk Covert, the main man at Smirk and Dagger and Smirk and Laughter Games. I actually proud to say that I own every game in the Smirk and Dagger line. It's a fantastic company, and this game is no exception to that. So designed by Brian Merlongi, another good friend of ours at Bodhana, Michael Dunsmore, and Jordan Nichols. The basic idea behind this is that it's a game. It's kind of a, if you ever saw Whose Line Is It Anyway, it's kind of like Party Quirks or Psychiatrist, very similar to this. Each player, or one player, around the table per round has a quote-unquote problem behavior. So maybe it might be that you actually people too much, or you're addicted to interpretive dance, or something that's kind of quirky, and definitely kind of bordering on a lot of nerd theme. The other players are basically the friends who have gathered around to do an intervention. So the game's played in 3 rounds where you're basically like, we need to talk about the thing. And you're able to give like a short phrase or some one-word hints about what the thing is. Then round 2 is how that thing is affecting everyone. And then the third one is a proposed solution to the problem. But here's the rub, right? So the players have to guess the problem. They gain more points the earlier that they guess. Players around the table giving the clues get more points the longer it takes the player to guess their particular problem behavior. If they don't guess it, no one gets points. So it's this very weird balance beam. Again, wibbly wobbly, like we said. What's a good clue versus a bad clue? Because you want to give enough of a hint, and that's actually one of the rules, is you can't say, yeah, we need to talk about the thing that's problem. That's not a hint. That's not going to help the player. So it's not like you're completely throwing them into East Jabip to, not give them a chance, because then you're not going to have them guess it. So you're kind of looking for that sweet spot. And even when the player starts guessing, there's a hot and cold meter that the game utilizes. So you go, you're getting warmer, you're getting warmer. So it's a very kind of tug of war kind of a thing. It is a very humorous game. One of the cool things also about the clues is that the table gets to kind of say, that's not enough. You need to give him more of a clue than that, which is nice because it's, again, one of those things that James and I talked about earlier, one of those ways that we build in assistance to some of these games, because this type of thinking is not something everyone excels at. It's not something that you can't phrase your brain, because most people are, just tell me the thing. Well, in this game, I don't want to just tell you the thing because I don't want you to guess it right away. I want you to get it eventually, but only when it means more points for me. So I have to give you enough, but not too much. A lot of creativity. It's a very fun game. There are some people who, through their own personal experience, find the topic structure and the idea of intervention as something not to be made fun of. Again, there are just as many points on the other side, saying that it's not making fun of that process. It's using a pretty standard convention. If you've ever watched Party Quirks, it's pretty much the same game, just not against the backdrop of an intervention. You're at a party and people have to kind of clue into what their particular quirk is. The party host must guess. It's the same thing. It's a standard improv drama game, right? It's just a reinvention of the formula. I personally love, as my old man reference of the webinar, it is art done by the artist who did Dr. Katz. So you may notice the squiggly lines and how the characters look like they're from that show because it was drawn by the same person. And I'll stop now. Moving through our next game, James.
Geek trivia.
Woohoo!
So this is Trivial Pursuit for people that don't know history or geography. Also, like, if there's pie, it's because you brought it. There's no pie pieces, really. So the idea here is you roll a die and you get a specific area of geeky knowledge, right? And the cards, as you see there on them, have different colors for different subject materials. It will say things like Bond villains, right? And then players have to wager, like, well, I can name 6. Well, I can name 14.
Well, go ahead, big hitter. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if that person names their 14 Bond villains, they score. They get points for being able to actually do what their braggadocious nature said that they were going to do. So this is a great game because it has like a wide variety of topics. So even though it says Geek Out, like, there's a massive amount of different topics and questions and things that can, that can be tackled. There's some discussion areas sometimes. about what qualifies as said thing. It is where I was originally introduced to the term actually, because that was something that was uttered at the table a lot.
Intensely.
Yeah.
Actually, that is not a part of the Avengers franchise.
Jack, you put this on the list, so I want to make sure that you get a chance to.
It's a game that has many different versions. There's a pop culture party version that does have things like books, etc. The main one is, you have role-playing games, you have fantasy, you have sci-fi, you have comic books. So there's a lot of different add-ons to this game. We actually use this for years. We use this in Bodhana programming when we go to different events. We did a version of this for GirlCon a number of years ago in the York area, where it was a Girl Scout convention that was celebrating girl power. And so what we did was we turned it into a game show, and all of the topics were about famous female athletes, political figures, people throughout history that were all famous women. And we kind of played it elimination style for the final round, which is you have your finalists and you have 10 seconds to name the thing in the category. If you repeat, you're out. If you can't name an answer in 10 seconds, you're out. That's a cutthroat version, and we make sure that people are comfortable ahead of time. But it's a lot of fun, and it can be played very easily right out of the box. Not difficult at all. So Geek Trivia, again, an incredible title. That isn't, it's trivia, but not like really. It's more like list serve, the board game. Like, would probably be a good way,
It's kind of like trivia and name that tune.
Yeah, that's a good.
In a lot of ways, like you're kind of betting on like who can do more of a thing.
Yep. Biggest nerd on the planet, or geek, depending. I don't know what the breakdown is on that thing. Okay. So that is our sample of games. James, you want to take us out as always?
Yeah, so if you would like to know more about the Bodhana Group, I have some suggestions. Since we did a whole bunch of game suggestions, this is our list of us suggestions. You can find us on the interwebs, www.thebodhanagroup.org. You can email us if you would like to drop us a electronic correspondence at thebodhanagroup@gmail.com. You can find us as the Bodhana Group on Facebook or at the Bodhana Group on the tweets, which I actually just made my own personal Twitter account today, finally, after years. I made it because I wanted to track when the Xbox Series X was being restocked. You can order Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness through Drive-Thru RPG. That is our manual about the therapeutic application of role-playing games.
Yep.
Soon to be added, a Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness, the Part 2, which is going to do board games, because we are an equal tabletop opportunity organization. And then we are going to be giving people a lot more info about this as time goes. We do have our annual convention, Save Against Fear, which is going to be online this year in 2021. Playing it safe, folks. One more year.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a lot more info about how to join up with that, what's going to be going on, and what the deal is. That's all of our stuff. Hey, look at that.
Hey, and we're back, and we're
Hi.
huge. All right.
So thanks everybody for joining us for Social Skills. I know Jack and I did a lot of talking tonight, but we're developing our own social skills and our ability to share and teach,
absolutely,
and develop. Yeah,
get more socially interacting. Conversing. Yes, just as a public service announcement, conversate is not a word. You can have a conversation and you can converse, but conversate is not a word. Not that you should stop saying it if you want to. Who am I to tell you what to do, right?
If it is not a word, you would not be able to vocalize it to tell people that it doesn't exist because there would be no way to say it.
Oh, yes.
All words are made up words.
That is true. That is true. That's very Carlin of you. I love it.
Do do do.
And now you know. So, as always, folks, I have been, still am, and will be tomorrow. Jack Birkenshock Jr., your ED from TBG.
And I am, as I have been told, in accordance with the prophecy, James Kirk, your TTGM RPG KP Niner.
Put a niner in there? Are you using a walkie-talkie?
Shut up, Richard.
We
So
said
thanks,
we're talking
everybody.
movies, yeah. We do.
Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Yes.
You can keep up with the content on the Bodhana site, and we'll keep them coming.
Yes.
So have a good night. Have good gaming.
Yes. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We're almost through the woods on the pandemic. So let's continue to support each other, be there for everyone, and be well. Be well, folks.